Hello, everyone. My name is Ron Bachar, and I'm from the product management team in our functional testing portfolio, and I'm super excited to be here with you today. Looking at the answers as the poll, I think that you guys are going to get some great and inspiring insights about what we have created for you today. Basically, we are going to cover, I would say, most of the new stuff that we have introduced around testing and around how to do AI, using AI in our testing solution set. Together with me today, I'm also very delighted to honor Chris Trimper from Independent Health. Chris, would you like to start introducing yourself?
Yeah, sure, that'd be great. Thanks for having me here today. I am the Enterprise QA Automation Architect at Independent Health. Hold on, the poll screen's covering my screen. Just on mine, don't worry. I've been doing software quality assurance for a little over 16 years, focusing majority of it in functional test automation. And I've had the ability to be using the Micro Focus automation solutions for a little over 9 years now. I've had an opportunity to speak at a variety of different conferences and sessions around test automation, including the Micro Focus solutions as they were here with HPE and with HP. And I currently hold the position of the Director of Education for Vivid Worldwide, the largest independent software community for specializing in other solutions. And I love the opportunity to come here and talk as a customer just to share some of the great things that we're doing and help others understand the benefits they can get from using some techniques like we are from these tools. So thanks for having me.
Thank you, Chris. I'm also very honored also to have one more speaker together with us today. And this is Archie Robostoff. He is the head of our functional testing and performance engineering to give his point of view of the state of the business. Hi, Archie. Can you hear us?
I can. Thanks for having me. Excellent. All right. So just wanted to outline just for a few minutes kind of the things that we at Micro Focus are focused on. I know it's a little bit redundant there. And how we're helping customers solve digital transformation and why the subject that you're going to be learning about from Eran and Chris today are so impactful to this. Obviously, in the age of the consumer is the boss. We are seeing digital transformations create new opportunities to engage with products and services. Even if the product itself is relatively simple, there's a lot of complexity in interacting with that product, such as a simple donut or a simple cup of coffee. And what happens in this scenario, especially in the era of COVID, is that it becomes almost an insatiable hunger that is driven by both the business and the consumer, because it is win-win. I mean, if we look at just airline applications, I myself, prior to the COVID shutdowns, was traveling quite extensively, and I never really had to speak to anybody. Right, I could just literally interact with the products and services of the airline directly, and I think that's win-win for everybody. The airline gets to offload a lot of labor costs with having to answer phone calls, very simple queries, and so it is really revolutionizing how people are delivering software and how people look at what is a product and how do people interact with those products. And this is essentially what we at Micro Focus have been targeted with for a number of years. So next slide, please. On this one, essentially what we focus in is looking at how do we deliver products. And when we look at the sort of end-to-end flow of how products are delivered, especially when organizations are transforming themselves to deliver a little bit more in incremental ways or pick up more agility, you start to see bottlenecks occurring in other areas. And so we really focus on helping customers move from now until, to next, kind of where they need to be. And one of the key areas that we see always popping up as a bottleneck, especially as customers get more iterative and they're putting more velocity through those release teams, is in the area of testing. And the issue here is that pretty much all the other areas of transformation, agile backlog, the ability of doing end-to-end performance tests, doing quality coverage. All that stuff is fairly straightforward, especially when you're transforming from before and after. And sometimes it gets much more simple. But in the area of functional testing, it actually gets exponentially more complicated. If you think about kind of how we used to do things a long time ago, we'd have a long cycle time of delivering one major product. We'd have a long cycle time of being able to functionally test it. And there was very limited environments in which we had to test. It was usually limited to desktop technologies and maybe a couple of server platforms. Well, now that's exponentially more complicated. We've got endless varieties of mobile device types. We've got all kinds of browser environment derivatives. And that, if you're just testing that once a year, is a monumental effort. But having to ram through release cycles every maybe 2 to 3 weeks, maybe every month, that starts to become a big problem. And customers tend to say, well, maybe we just shouldn't test, or we should be testing less. And it just becomes a very expensive proposition, which essentially bottlenecks the entire process. So what we're saying is every major digital transformation of scale and complexity is going to be halted by functional testing unless something changes. And luckily, we've kind of come up with some areas that we can really help here. And this is where this topic is very impactful. So what do we really focus on when it comes to functional testing? Next slide, please. We try to ask the big questions, right? The questions that we try to sort of ask here is what and how, right? What needs to be done to get automation going, right? I mean, what types of things are your practitioners doing? What do they have to keep doing over and over again? And what happens if we can't get that right? Right? Is it a risk to the business? Is it something that's acceptable? Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. We tend to see that, usually customers like applications that work and don't break things. And then the second question we're really focused on asking is how? How does that automation work today? How is it that that automation is going when things change so rapidly on the development side? Maybe even just a minor change because you saw a market anomaly that you want to take advantage of and you want to add a new buy button somewhere or a new customer interaction button. What's that going to do? How much effort needs to get done to make that happen? And how much is this costing us all? Right. So by focusing on the what needs to get done to get automation done, and then how is that actually running, we've kind of come up with our strategic focus around leveraging AI and machine learning. And that's really solely where this project is focused on, helping organizations get the what done much better, right? Why do we have to have 7 different scripts for 7 different endpoints that I need to modify every time something breaks? And I say 7 scripts like that's a constrained environment. In reality, you probably have 700 scripts that need to change every time. And that's not going to get any better anytime soon. And then in the same mindset, the AI project is impacting the how. Right? How does that automation work? Is it automation that is tied to the specific SDK of the endpoint that you're dealing with, which is going to be a variable from now until the end of time? Or can it just think and act more like a human, where regardless of the technology change or the endpoint, that automation script will continue to run? Right. So that's why we're so excited about this AI project that Aran and the team have created, because it really makes a huge impact. No longer do you have these exponential numbers of scripts that keep growing that you have to deal with. No longer will you have a scenario in which a minor change to the UI layer is going to break all kinds of automation downstream. It's more resilient. It brings more people into the fold, and it really gets us to making sure that automation runs right. And it runs well into the future, regardless of who wrote it. So with that, I don't want to take up too much more time because you've got a lot more exciting things coming downstream. So with that, I'll pass it back to, I believe, Aran. So take it away, my friend.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Archie, for joining us today. I'd like to start this session with taking you with me to the journey testing has gone through in the last, say, 4 decades. So, if we're looking in the early 80s, where it was mainly about manual testing because there was no real need to scale testing beyond manual, and user experience, honestly speaking, was not really exist, right? And the number of the business processes that we need to interact with was a very limited variety of those. And that was not justifying the need to have automation. And manual testing, as I said, was a good enough a proposition back then. In the early 90s, what happened is that we saw the increased desktop ecosystem and emerging web, mainly because of the introduction of the Windows platform with the first native desktop applications and the first introduction of the Internet Explorer and Netscape back then. And that was the moment where we saw more and more applications introduced in that kind of form. And we had initial need to have a lightweight automation tools. And this is mainly because of we saw the number of tests that needs to be validated growing from tens to hundreds. What happened in the first decade of that century is that web is the king. We saw other vendors coming to the space of such as Chrome and Firefox and Safari and Mac and others. But something also happened in 2007. And to be more precise, on June 9, 2007, where Apple announced the first smartphone. And this smartphone came with a computing power. This smartphone came with the ability to run applications on top of it, both native as well as hybrid applications. And that was the moment where it changed completely the industry in terms of testing, in terms of automation, and the need to have much more robust automation capabilities, because the number of tests that needs to be covered now, rather than hundreds, we faced with thousands of tests that needs to be covered. And as Archie said in the beginning of the session, we also see a shift in the way we are writing software, in the way we deliver software, and we saw the first agile concepts, iterative deliveries, we want to release faster, and so on and so forth, which also increased the need to have automation because thousands of tests needs to be covered. And sometimes those tests are repetitive ones because now we have the notion of nightly builds and so on and so forth. In the decade that we've just finished, it's all about scale, right? Digital first, and user drives everything. And the number of tests just increase exponentially. So we've seen tens of thousands of different tests that needs to be covered on a daily basis. And I would say what will be the future? Probably more things, probably more IoT that are becoming smarter and smarter. We see the wearable coming with a computing power that will need to also get into the testing cycle. And we cannot even forecast what the number of tests that needs to be covered are. So the bottom line, it's we need to work smarter. Definitely not harder, because as you see here in this simple timeline, the world has changed, and so should automation. Now, with the need to be smarter here in Micro Focus, we have been looking at some technologies, which we will show you later on in today's session, and how those are incorporated into our solutions. But what it means to be smarter? It means in our space, it means that we need to be smarter with the way we do the test design. It means that we need to be smarter with the way we do the overall test automation. And it means that we need to be smarter with the way we're maintaining our tests, taking into account the tens of thousands of tests that we need to cover. I wouldn't say on a daily basis, but definitely on a release basis. And if we want to be smarter, it's something that we will affect the entire business, and we will not be able to keep the pace and address the business needs. Chris, I have a question for you. What in your space it means to be smarter?
Well, we certainly carry working smarter in a lot of these areas that you're mentioning in terms of design, building our tests, and being able to maintain our tests easier. But everything kind of folds under this umbrella of adding testing efficiencies. Whether it be efficiencies in how we plan the tests, efficiencies in how we actually build them in terms of techniques, and then carrying those techniques into test maintenance. Speaking of efficiencies, I'm remembering back to this session that you gave in Chicago, 2019 at the ADM Summit. And, my memory of that is around standing up on stage and talking about how he was a cool cat. I mean, not how he was a cool cat, even though he is a cool cat, but how he's talking about how the future of test automation is with cool cats and cool dogs. And I'm like, what is he talking about? And the short version of it is the notion of training with giving the computer's eyes, giving computer vision, AI, and other means for the testing to interface with the application and understand things on the screen. And I thought that was a really cool concept, this AI engine that could automatically identify elements that the human can understand, whether it be by text or recognizable things. I don't really know if anybody's going to have a cool cat in their application, but if they do, I'm pretty sure the tool would understand it. So this cool cat was embedded in my mind, but I wasn't really sure where it could apply yet. And I think that's really the beginning of our journey into, expanding our usage of UFT and continually adding efficiencies into what we do here.
Thank you, Chris. Chris, you mentioned many times the word AI, and up until now we kind of used the AI as a buzzword. I'd like to continue with giving a kind of overview of where the AI is disrupting the market today. So what we see in terms of predictions that more than 80% of businesses says that AI, it's actually a strategic priority of their businesses. And around about 75% of commercial enterprise application will use AI by 2021 as indicated by IDC. And more than 80% of the emerging technologies will have AI foundations inside of them by 2021, which is the year we are all today. But those are kind of predictions, maybe like a short-term predictions. Let's see what the actuals are already. So with this, see that around about 40% of organizations use AI in their workplace in FY19 already, and probably this number is much bigger in the year that we've just entered, which is the FY20. And around about 50% of digitally mature organizations say that they have already a defined AI strategy, exactly where they are going to adopt AI, what are the AI technologies that they are going to implement within the organizations, and so on and so forth. And the number which amazes us all is that more than 50% of executives says that AI solutions that implemented in their businesses have already increased the productivity and the efficiency in their entire workplace. But those are predictions and actuals. I would like now, instead of continue using the word AI, show you kind of what is this buzzword is all about, because everyone today is using the AI, and walk you through for like 2-3 minutes about the basics of AI, which I'm pretty much sure most of you know this information already, but making sure all of us on the same page. So AI, it's an area of computer science that mainly trying to aim and provide intelligence to the machines. And machine learning, it's a subset of the AI where basically it's a set of algorithms that eventually create those machines being able to elaborate those algorithms and make them smarter by their own using a vast amount of data sets. And deep learning is also a subset of machine learning where we use multi-layered kind of algorithms that eventually help us to create those algorithms in a much more smart way. And you see this data science pink circle here. It's not by mistake. It's because the data science, it's a topic where it's mainly related to the machine learning and deep learning, because the data, it's a crucial piece of the entire machine learning and deep learning. Because as you will see later on in this presentation, when you have a problem and you want to solve it with AI, the first thing that you need to define is the problem that you want to solve. And the second thing, which is the most important thing, is what the data that is going to be fitted into those algorithms, into the training process of machine learning and deep learning algorithms will include from, in order to avoid bias kind of situation, or eventually in AI engines that will not be able to perform as they are expecting to. You also can see that there is a bit of a difference between machine learning and deep learning, where in machine learning, there is a human being that defines the different features. For example, as you can see here on the right side, you have the home, and we see the triangle, we see some elements, and the human being actually define what will be the features that will define home. In deep learning, we are just giving the element, in that case, again, the home, and the deep learning engine will create the feature on its own. Okay, and eventually, once we use the AI engine that will be created, it will be able to give us if it's an home or if it's not an home. And this is also super important thing to understand, where AI will usually tell you what it is or what it isn't. It wouldn't say that this is something else because it was not educated to do this kind of thing. The second piece is that the software of AI is trained to perform, as I said previously, a simple task as well as complex one. As you can see here on the example on the right side, this is a training data that was fitted into an AI engine to actually recognize different elements that we are using on our mobile applications on a daily basis. And we can see here just two simple examples, the profile and the cart. We are doing the training process using a deep learning algorithms, and eventually we have a model. The model is being sent into the testing. Once we satisfied with the testing, means we can deliver this model to production and craft the entire AI engine that was trained into the program that will host it. Think about it, that later on you are going to see how UFT is leveraging and infusing AI capabilities inside of it, very similar to what you guys saw here. Now, the next thing is that AI applications at the end of the day are mainly based on pattern matching algorithms, and there are few layers of features. As I previously mentioned, there are the low-level features, there are the medium-level features, and the high-level features. And as long as you go to the high-level features, you see more or less abstractive kind of elements that eventually will combine the element that we try to identify. And this is a very important thing to mention here, that AI, at least in the computer vision space, it's not about image processing. It's not about taking an image, store it somewhere, and then try to do a simple comparison like we did in the past. It's a much more small thing, and it's about pattern matching. So AI engine that compiled from computer vision does not store any pictures whatsoever. They are trained to recognize features that eventually will tell us exactly what we see on the screen. And the last but not least is about AI engines will consist of input data, comparing the outputs to the expected result. So once you have an AI engine, it will be fitted by the new data. There is the inference stage that will be done using the AI model. And eventually there will be a prediction of what we see. Do you see a cart or do you see something else? You know, in Chris' example about the cat and the dogs, think about it for a second. Sometimes you see this animal from a long distance and you kind of, okay, so what do I see? Do I see a cat? Do I see a dog? And you have some features hosted in your brain using the neural network in your brain that help you eventually to identify exactly if it's a cat or if it's a dog. Now, once the AI applications are, the AI engine are ready, there are applications that use the output of the AI training and apply to solve a very specific problem. And a specific problem can be, for example, analyze CT and MRI scans. So now you can imagine to yourself that in order to create such an AI engine, we need to feed the deep learning algorithms with, I would say, millions of different CT and MRI scans, which we tag in advance and say exactly what we see in this in CT and MRI scans. And the AI engine in the training process will be able to eventually to predict, given a new CT or giving a new MRI, what exactly it is happening with this specific image. But you know what? If you will take this AI engine and will send it to a car, to be able to recognize a stop sign and slow down the car eventually, that won't work because this engine knows how to recognize CT and MRI scans. It is not built in order to recognize the traffic lights and understand what is the red, what is the yellow, and what is the green light. You will need to build an AI engine that this is the purpose of it. And again, if you will take eventually the AI that was built to recognize a stop sign and slow down a car, probably it won't be able to use as an automated responders and online customer support. So if we kind of on the same page now with understanding that what the basics of AI are, and in order to have an AI engine that will do the work, we first need to define the problem. The second thing, we need to feed this AI in the training process with a vast amount of data, millions of records of data, that eventually the prediction and the accuracy will be high as we can expect it to be. Then what is the problem? In our space, in the testing space. And you heard Archie in the beginning of the session talk about the needs to test faster and with the what and with the how. And this is one of the key challenges that we see in the market today. And you know what? When I saw your answers around test keep breaking, pace of change, lack of coverage, then what the challenges prevent us from scale test automation? Because if tests keep breaking, we cannot scale automation. If the pace of change is fast and we cannot respond to it, that will prevent us from scale automation. And eventually, if we will not have coverage, that will prevent us to scale the test automation. Now, if we double click on what are the three key elements that will prevent us from scale automation, those are the following three. The first, It's not a secret. We all live in a spaces where we have not then like 12 months releases, 18 months releases. I remember myself when I was a QA director in the early 2000s, and I had like a build in 6 months. And then I told to my development, now don't talk to any one of the QA engineers for the next 3 months. That was the period in the early 2000s where in just 5 years ago, we had like a release once in 6 months. And nowadays we have a release, I would say, here in Micro Focus on a daily basis. And guess what? You guys might have also releases on a daily basis and you are not even aware of it, because the nightly builds, it's kind of released to production, because those nightly builds that you want to make sure that the daily check-ins of the developers didn't introduce any regression whatsoever to the basic operations of the application. This is kind of a release to the QA that it should be treated as so. And that's perfectly fine if you're not in that position already, but you're probably in those, I would say, monthly releases, month releases, and the same will happen to you in that case. The second challenge, it's about time and effort. When Archie showed you the Dunkin' Donuts and the other application, think about the fact that you need to cover this simple business process of buying a Dunkin' Donuts on Android, on iOS, on a mobile web, on a desktop browser, whether if it's a Mac, whether if it's Chrome on a Windows operating system, and so on and so forth. And you need to create multiple assets for the same purpose. Think about the amount of time you guys spent on design. And not just this, you need to spend tremendous amount of time on the execution, making sure those test environments will be available, making sure that those test environments will include all the different permutations, or reasonably the amount of permutations that will kind of represent what your users are using in production. And the last but not least, it's not a secret that automation is hard. And it requires a skill set of having a basic coding and scripting, and sometimes more advanced scripting and coding. And that means that we are in a kind of a bottleneck, because we are counting only on our automation engineers, which usually still, unfortunately, they are the minority of the team, in order to be able to keep the pace and also increase the overall coverage of automation. The bottom line of those three key challenges is that, first of all, we find ourselves with numbers in the market that we see it all over, with around about 30% of automation rates. And unfortunately, this number is decreasing because of the permutations, because of the fact that we need to release faster and all the things that I've just walked you through. And unfortunately, the number of maintenance is increasing, because now it's like 50%, and we see this number increasing as days goes by, because think about the amount of tests that you create that represent the same test. And if it breaks, you need to maintain 10 tests, which will do the same. So those two numbers are the bottom line of why we cannot scale automation. Those are the bottom line of exactly the things that you guys answered when you had the poll in the beginning of this session. Chris, I want to hear again your thoughts about what the challenges that you faced in independent health.
I certainly think you got the categories spot on in terms of the challenges that we see. And I remember sharing with you a list of them. We're going to go through them, and they happen to funnel into these categories. The first of which is we want to continually have speed in any way that you can think of in terms of testing, to build tests, to execute tests, et cetera, without having to sacrifice quality. Just because we can script faster or have things go in a faster process doesn't mean that we should be sacrificing quality. I mean, we are in quality assurance. There's no way we'd want to do that. So that's most certainly a challenge. Followed by that, we also have where, we keep talking about these releases. And in a perfect world, one release equals one build, but that's not necessarily true. A release might introduce 10 features, but each feature may be released in separate builds. Very frequently releases come out and we find defects in them. That's why we do our testing. So we're going to need it for multiple builds. So, these frequent number releases are interesting. For benefiting our time and expediency, we want to continually embrace different testing efficiencies. I encourage any testing team to take a minute and pause and look at what you're doing and figure out why did it take us so long to get there. Whatever our destination may be, we should be looking at things to figure out how to design tests better, how to make it so we can run them better. When we were looking at this particular instance, we were taking on a mobile app, thought, oh geez, not yet another one of these pieces of technology we have to deal with. And my instant first thought was, oh Lord, I really don't want to have to deal with understanding the intricacies in the back end of these mobile applications. Is there another way? Is there another answer? Next, of course, and this feels like a Wizard of Oz moment, lions and tigers and bears, oh my, and this was a big oh my. We have so many testing devices, albeit few OS combinations, but it's just yet another multiplier to add to our factors of how in the world are we going to cover our users? We just have so many things out there to test. And I'm looking at it, and you combine some of these things together, and I think I just want to have one single easy solution and path. We think about what it means to test. Blanket statement, testing should be easier. Whether it's being able to script faster, adding efficiencies, that one right in the middle is the bullet for me. Just didn't want to have to know about all these details of how they're building things. And then lastly, in the heart of all of the testers, from a proper user experience, we should always be thinking that how do we become more like the user? How do we test in a way in which we are closer to the user experience? So, it would just be great to have it where we are closer in that way. And these are a lot of the challenges that we faced, knowing from the history of our other apps, and then beginning to take on this brand new mobile application that we were bringing in-house, doing development in-house, and being fully responsible for this mobile application that we're rolling out.
Thank you. And Chris, that was the moment when you were actually was thinking about the cats and the dogs, I guess.
I had a cat and a dog moment, and I think everybody in the office thought I was insane when I started talking about cats and dogs. Like, oh my gosh, we brought in a mobile app and Chris flipped his lid. But the trick of remembering the cool cat certainly worked. And I'm like, wait a minute, there might be an easier way to deal about this. Testing may end up being easier. I might not have to deal with a mobile app framework, and it may just be able to be a easier, speedier way to do testing. So it was absolutely worth a shot to embrace this new technology.
Yep. Okay, so now I want to kind of cover an example from today's reality to convey all the key messages that both Chris and myself walked through up until now. And the example, it's relatively very simple one. We need to automate a business process of buying an item in an e-commerce application. That's it. But the application is available as native mobile app, as well as hybrid, and also available on the desktop browser. So just think about the two challenges that immediately can raise out of this simple business process that we need to cover. The first, we need 4 scripts that's in order to automate the same flow. Now, I know you might gonna tell me, no, we need 1 script, and then we're going to have different object repositories in order to interact with the objects and the underlying identifier. That's right, but still you need to have 4 different assets. You need to create those, you need to maintain those. And once you need to maintain those, you're getting into the situation of ROI of the overall automation. And once the automation breaks, and unfortunately it happens many times, and as you guys also indicated in the poll, I think that was the #1 test keeps breaking, then we find ourselves again and again and again dealing with new design on multiple assets for the same purpose, multiple maintenance, and so on and so forth. In order to convey the message even more, I created in advance a simple, I would say, part of the business process, which is just the login action. We're using UFT One and UFT Mobile. So what we're going to do here, we are going to grab a device from UFT Mobile, and we are going to run this test of providing a username and password, clicking on the login button, and everything will work just smoothly. Not just that, is if you will think about it for a second, this login action probably is going to be wrapped as an action or as a business component, and it will be used all over because most of the business processes, regardless this buying an item, will use the login action. And if something will happen to this, I would say login action, then it might influence on not just the login action, but many business processes that we have as a need to test this application. And just yesterday night, what happened is that one of our developers decided that he's going to flip between the menu and the cart, as you can see it here. And as a result of this change, which is relatively a very simple change and a visual one, which should not influence on the test automation whatsoever. But what happened behind the scenes is that this change, even without awareness of the developer, goes to one of my underlying identifier to also be changed, which means that if I'll run this test now, you can imagine to yourself that instead of clicking on the menu, I'll click probably on something else. In that case, it was the cart. And instead of finding the username and the password and the login, I will get nothing, which means the test has failed. And if I will catch it during the day, then I'll have the time to do the maintenance for my iOS, for my Android, for my browser, and for my native mobile. If I will not catch it during the day and it will be discovered or surfaced during the night run, it means that my nightly run is failed. It means that my test automation impact the overall continuous testing, and the entire DevOps is also affected as a result of that, and it's not in the best efficient way that we can go there. Now, why this is happening? It is happening because for the last 20 years, object identification is based on the physical object properties. There is no magic here. We have a framework. You heard Chris about the different frameworks that he needs to deal with. Those frameworks has their own description of how to interact with objects. And we kind of trying to be the magician of identifying those objects in a way that first will be a unique way. And second, once changes will be introduced to the application, those will be robust enough, the way we identify the objects, so it won't influence on the entire automation. But unfortunately, as I said previously, many times those changes impact the underlying object identifiers, which eventually leads to automation break. And that was the kind of the thinking process for us. What if we could automate a business process exactly as human sees it? And just look at this screen. If I'll ask you guys to find the cart, if I'll ask you guys to find the profile, if I ask you guys to find the search button in the mobile device or whether in the browser, you will be able to find it with no problem, because you are using your eyes to see things on the screen. Those things are being sent to your brain using your neural network system. And this neural network system kind of connect all the different features, and eventually you see the different elements on the screen. And also, if I'll ask you to automate this business process of buying an item in an e-commerce application, you wouldn't need to get from me 4 different scripts. It's good enough that I'll just give you the instruction and I'll ask you to run it on Android, on iOS, on a mobile web, as well as on a desktop browser. It might be slight, changes between the desktop browser, which can be described in the manual test, right? So you don't need 4 manual scripts in order to run it against 4 manual endpoints. So that was the kind of the thinking process for us. And even further, when you're thinking about how computers see those different elements on the screen, this is exactly how computers see the things. And we are trying to be the magician of helping the computer to see the things exactly as you see it here, using the different locators, using the CSS, using the XPath, and so on and so forth. Now, so we said that we want to provide intelligence to the machines so they can see something, but they probably cannot have the intelligence, so it should be an artificial intelligence. And that was the moment for us where we started to look at AI major research areas. And we decided to focus on the following 3. The first one is the perception, which the perception is the one that helps us to to help us to mimic the different human senses, right? So the different human senses be to see the things, hear the things, touch the things, and so on and so forth. In that case, we have leveraged the computer vision capabilities in order to see the elements and in order to recognize those. But this is just the first part. So now that I can recognize button or I can recognize a text input, I need to understand what can be done with it. Same as human beings react to different elements. So for that, we have built and used the machine and deep learning capabilities in order to build the UI elements classifications. And once we see button, we know that we can click on it. Once we see a text input, we know that we need to provide an input in order to interact with it. And last but not least, we have also leveraged natural language processing to simplify the test case design. And why is that? Remember that I told you about the third challenge about automation is hard. We are going to simplify the test automation space in a way that was not introduced ever before. We're going to introduce an NLP capabilities that are, I would say, the bottom line of the script will be more of a manual script rather than an automated script. And by that, we are kind of socialize the automation efforts, not just for the automation engineers, but for the entire team. So the bottom line of using those three areas within AI, as I told you previously, we have infused our UFT family, in that case, UFT One and UFT Developer, with AI capabilities. It's not a cloud service whatsoever. It doesn't require any new installations of high-end machines. The AI service, it's an embedded service into the UFT One that you guys already own. And this AI include the following components: the eyes, which are leveraged by using computer vision to identify the object the same way as human does. It leveraged the brain. So the brain is actually using the neural networks, or to be more precise, the artificial neural networks that help us to interact with the different objects and in a natural way. And the last but not least, the translator, which help us to write tests using plain English. And I would say almost, because we still want to keep on a structure that will make sense to the entire team, and not just one person will understand what he wrote in the plain English. With that, what I'm going to show you now is this business process that I was talking about, buying an item in an e-commerce application, leveraging all the AI capabilities that we have as of today in UFT One and in UFT Developer. This demo is going to be split into 4 parts: the design phase. In that phase, you're going to see how I'm going to design a single script using our AI capabilities, and even further, even using, I would say, part of the application or part of the mock-up that's created in order to build the application, even before the application exists, to start doing my test design. It will be followed by the feedback and how I can provide feedback to overall experience and to Micro Focus to improve the AI engine. Remember that I told you about the fact that AI engine are built and will be much more accurate with the mass data. We are in a position where today we have a superb AI engine, and it gets improved as we move forward from feedback we're getting from our customers on a daily basis, hundreds of different feedbacks, and those feedbacks are wrapped in a kind of an image that eventually sent back to our AI engines, that eventually a new AI model is being created and you can consume it. After we will do the design and the feedback, I'll move forward to show you how we are going to do an execution on a single script against multiple endpoints. So no more you need to create multiple assets for the same purpose. You're going to design a single script and you're going to execute it on a browser. You're going to execute it on a mobile device. And guess what? You're going to execute it on multiple languages. And last but not least, all the reporting capabilities and how the reporting can help you as of today with your AI journey. So with that, I'll start with design. And before starting with the demo, I would like to cover what you see here on the screen. So what you see here is taken from the latest UFT One version. And you can see here that you have several thumbnails. Those thumbnails are not the real application. This is the mockup. So we got a mockup from our development team. It means that there is no code whatsoever behind it. There are no objects. And UFT One with the AI capability is capable of identify all the different elements already. And guess what? I'll be able to start creating and design my test even before a single line of code exists in my application. So we are talking about shift left. Think about this shift left. You, the QA team, can start doing the testing or doing the design of the testing even before development has started to run the single line of code. So it will accelerate your test design. As you can see later on, it will simplify the overall script creation. The script itself, it's much more resilient. So as long as human being will be able to interact with the application, our AI engine will be able to do the same. And last but not least, as you can see here, the script is super simple and it reduced the skill set barriers. Later on, if time permits today, I'll also show you the tech preview of our new codeless capabilities, which are also part of UFT. So I'm going to drive the demo now, and I'm going to show you how I'm going to create it from scratch. For that, I'm going to open the UFT One, the latest release, which is the 1502, create a new GUI test. And the first thing, I will upload all my mockup images. And I will start simply drag and drop all the elements that have the pink rectangle, which means that I can interact with. So you can see the different elements. So the profile, the username, which I need to interact with, and type a username and type a password. Of course, all the encryption stuff exists over there. Once I finish that and I'm getting the application, we have also the recorder, the brand new recorder. So now I'm going to interact with all the elements, and you can see here that I can add checkpoints. I can add all the elements in order to drive the test. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to search for the item that I want to buy. So in that case, I'm going to click on it and just for the sake of the example, use the 70T. And you can see all the elements are being recognized. You can switch between visual elements and text using a very advanced OCR capabilities that we have. And most important, you have also the relations. So you can ask to call a specific item with the relations. It means what is the proximity of one element to be found in relation to the other element, exactly like human being will react to the test. So now you can see that the test is created. I can also use the inspect, not just the record option. So inspect will give me also the ability to click on a specific object. I don't need to do the recording A to Z. I can use the inspect in order to improve my test, in order to add some things that I forgot during the recording session. So once I created the first part, which is the design, and just think about it, I created a single test. You saw how fast it was. And this test is going to be used not only for the purpose of single endpoint, but as you will see later on in the execution, for multiple endpoints. But I'll be honest with you here, guys, and our AI engine is the most advanced engine in the market that you can find today, period. But there might be some elements which won't be identified yet, and that is perfectly fine. And this is exactly why we have built into UFT One the feedback mechanism, which will help you easily to provide this feedback to us. What it means feedback? It means that you guys can send us a specific snapshot from your application under test. Of course, you will have all the capabilities in order to do all the masking for information which you cannot share with us, and that is perfectly fine. And this snapshot will be sent directly to Micro Focus premises. Our AI engines will get those snapshots, will analyze those, and once a new model will be available to consumption, you will get a notification on that, and a new model will be available for your use. But what we also want to make sure that you guys will be able to complete the end-to-end process, even if the AI will not recognize all the elements. And exactly for that, what we have also built is the ability to have a combination between traditional property-based identification and AI. Also, we have added some additional capabilities around custom model. So if you have a specific and unique icons, we can interact together and we will be the custom model for you. And there are many ways to overcome the situation if AI won't identify everything. But just think about the fact that our customer base from the multiple industries, like I would say thousands of customers and hundreds of thousands of users on a daily basis share this feedback with us. I would say that our AI engine in the next 6 to 12 months will be the best AI engine in the space of test automation for the enterprise space. And just look what I did now. I defined the problem that I want to solve. We in Micro Focus in the functional testing now deal with this specific problem and we are going to collect the data together with you on top of the million amounts of records that were already collected, where eventually your AI engine, I would say, will be the Superman of the AI in the space of test automation. So let's see for a second how the feedback works. So you're going to see here that I'm going to take this checkout. And for example, the save pay does not work for me. I fired up the feedback service. I can do some pixelation, but I also need to mark the object which is not identified for me. I'll give the comment. I'll write it down, and I will either save it or either send the feedback, and that one will arrive directly to Micro Focus, as I told you previously. So that is the feedback mechanism. And again, that will help us to have up-to-date AI model, and for you, up-to-date AI model. And with the option to continue doing your testing with a property-based, you will get into the position where you are going to have uninterrupted testing. Why is that? Because you're going to use all the great technologies that are already supported inside UFT One, and we have more than 200 of those. Now the fun part starts. Now we move to the execution. So once we finished with the design, and in case we had issues, we are going to give the feedback, and now we are going to execute a test. This test that I've just created is going to be executed on the following environment. The first is going to use the Chrome in French. The second is going to use the mobile device on a native application. And the third one will run again on a Firefox in English. What you're going to get from this capability, just imagine how you're going to increase your coverage. And we talked about the fact that in order to scale automation, you need to increase the overall coverage that today is around 25 to 30%. And it's not because you cannot increase coverage, it's because you have the limitations of endpoints, it's because you have the limitations of time, and because of other limitations that exist within your organization. If you need to maintain a script, you don't need to maintain 3 different scripts. You're going to maintain a single script. Just think about the faster feedback that you're going to give to your developers, which eventually the overall cost will be saved. So let's play now this execution across platforms and languages. So this is the script that I've created. I've been using the data table from UFT, and you can see here that I'm going to use the browser in Chrome, the device in English, and then again the browser in Firefox. And you can see here the execution on French, the same test that I've created using our advanced OCR capabilities. Once the test will be finished, we will move to the next endpoint, which is the mobile device. It will happen in a second. There you go. The mobile device, which is the iPhone, and the native application in that case, the same script that I've created using our AI capability is going to be executed now against the mobile device. And last but not least, we are also going to use the Firefox on the English version of it. Of course, I could have continued to show you how it's going to run on Android, different platforms, different versions of Android, different versions of iOS, and so on and so forth, with the same script that I've created. Okay? So this is the execution. The bottom line, remember, you're going to increase the coverage, you're going to reduce maintenance, definitely going to get faster feedback to your developers, and overall cost saving. Last but not least is the reporting piece. The reporting part is the one that will help you to do the following. First of all, in your existing assets today, you can run the test as it is, and you're going to get an indication what steps can be already converted into the AI way. Means AI way, the AI util SDK that you show me, that you showed earlier in this demo. The second thing, it will help you to get a fast analysis if something has failed, both the high-level pass-fail kind of results, as well as pinpoint exactly where the problem is, and exactly what was identified, what was not identified, and if it's a problem in the script, or if it's a problem in the application itself. So let's see how it goes. So now we are running the rich reporting, and you can see here the 3 different platforms that I've been using. Let's look for the profile, and you can see all the different endpoints that I was interacting with. By the way, I want you to take a look on the next thing that I'm going to do now. I'm going to look also on the login action, and you can see here that in the browser it will be login. but in the mobile device, it will be sign in. We have also the understanding that this is a login page, and we easily can click on it, although it's not written login there. So we have similarities, and we have those algorithms that are being used in order to be able to act like a human being. With that, that was my part of the demo, but I think that it will be even more amazing. So you guys are going to see the demo from Chris Trimper on the independent health application. So Chris, the stage is yours to run the demo.
Thanks, Eran. So we looked at our backlog of tests, and to avoid any PHI woes or anything like that, and to keep the simple test nature of things, I chose a test that goes through and verifies our about screen. We want to make sure that the about screen is accurate. It has links that go to the right places. It tells you the right version, things like that. It's an easy test and universal. It'll allow us in this demonstration to focus less on, oh, this is what your app doing, but more on the interaction with the app. And lastly, let's face it, a screen like this, who really wants to test it anyways over and over again? This is just one of those mundane tests that we know we have to do. So it's a perfect candidate for automation. Before we dive into the test, I wanted to just go back and pinpoint on a couple of the identification methods on this next slide here. And some of them are, we have the ability, as Eran showed us, with the identification. This would be, if you're familiar with the object spy, the new object spy, which I suppose is worth mentioning as a customer. Object spy is still there. Object identification center is there. Both of them have the ability to make AI suggestions, which is pretty groovy. It's a great way to kind of act as almost like AI training wheels for yourself to kind of get a feel for how to use it. But this is a way that you can certainly use it. You can just drag it in. So this ability to click contact us can just be dragged right in here. You can certainly see on here, it's showing you all the different things that it's seeing, through the scan and whatnot in the application. Another option we have, and as a lot of folks that have been doing automation for a while is probably going to, either scare you or, make you shiver, is there is record and playback. Now, it's interesting because most people just think record and playback is a gimmick or it's useless or whatever. And I'm not saying this is something I use on a daily basis, but there's one neat thing here now that we're going to see, and that is the biggest problem I find with most record and playbacks is it builds really frail tests. It doesn't really understand how to interpret your DOM. Let's face it, most record and playback is for web browsers. It doesn't understand the HTML DOM. It doesn't understand how to interact with your elements. It makes really poor object decisions. Well, we're not dealing with, you think about layers of your application, we're not dealing back here anymore at the DOM, or actually that's backwards. I'm here. We're not dealing back here with the DOM. We're dealing up here, up front with the UI of the application. We're looking at our phones. We're looking at it at face value now. So, a developer, and I don't mean to, pick on developers often. They don't mean to do these things. They just don't understand the levels of ways that they can goof up our tests. A developer can change, as long as contact us is something that's here, that's interactable, they can change as many times as they want to. Now, I'm not a mobile app developer, but let's talk in web days. It could be a div, it could be a span, it could be in anything they want. It can be under any hierarchy, it can have any class, it can have any HTML ID. As long as that visible piece to the user is the same, it's very meaningful. So, they've kind of given a fresh breath to record and playback. And this is a great way to, make some automation accessible to all levels. Now, personally for me, I use this third method, and it's going to sound really lame, but I go through, on this next slide, I just have a screenshot. And you think, why a screenshot? Well, I go through, from an efficiencies perspective, one of the first things I do for doing a test is I walk through the whole scenario on the website, on the application, whatever it may be. And every time there's a state change, I take a screenshot. Because when I'm going through and I'm doing the scripting, I don't want to deal with user timeout issues. I don't want to deal with, oh, I forgot I closed the browser, or in the case of mobile devices. So here we leverage UFT Mobile with real deal devices in a cabinet or a series of cabinets, plugged in and then available, along with UFT One. I don't want to take up that device for a long period of time if I'm doing some scripting. So I want to get in, do my stuff, capture my screenshots, and then make that device available to people again for usage. So I'm not really hogging that device. So I take a screenshot. I've gotten a chance to use this AI engine for long enough that I can look at this and I can tell you how we need to script. So with that, I did a little recording, again, in the nature of not wanting to hog up a mobile device, and in case there are any network issues or anything, I did this recording. So the first thing you're going to see here is UFT One. I decided to be one of the cool kids and put it in dark mode so it looked all fancy and nice. But here I have literally that screenshot on the side here. I went into UFT Mobile. Every time there's a state change, I just hit take screenshot. I have a folder of them, and that's where I start my test. There are going to be one or two framework pieces in here for us for launching the app, for choosing the application, but I tried to keep it as native as possible so that you can relate to this scenario. So let's kick this off and let's see what we got going here. So as you can see, we have our screenshot off to the side. One of the first things that we're going to do is we're going to look for where we need to click on About, and there's an About link at the bottom. So here, think of it as, hey, AI, I want to do X, Y, or Z. And it's great to comment in your code. So I'm going to put a comment here saying that I want to click on the About. And we're going to do that. We're going to do a couple of things throughout my script. I'm going to add a lot of highlights because I want to have some visual cues for you to see. So it's not a trust in the magic sort of thing. So you can actually see what the engine is noticing. I'll be honest, unless you're doing a demonstration like this, I don't necessarily recommend doing a highlight on everything that you're going to do, just because it's extra actions in your test and it's extra things to do. But if you're doing a demonstration, it's a great technique to be able to say, this is what it's doing. It's not necessarily a bunch of magic. So we do simple things. We do a check to make sure the About's there. We highlight it, we click on it. Now, so you don't have to watch all of my typos, because no matter how many times I try, I make lots of typos. Just copy and paste, dump the rest of the script in there, because you want to see the magic of it running. So we're going to kick it off. I have this running on 2 devices, one Android and one iOS. I think we're starting off with the iOS device. Hopefully I can kind of talk through this a little bit. So we're going to go through, we're going to initialize a test. We're going to say reserve the device. We're going to pick the appropriate app and app version. And every one of our tests does a fresh install to make sure that we're starting off in a proper state. There's a previous test on there, but it's going to launch and install. And we can see it's going to expect to interface with the About link. And then because on the device, remember, this is acting like a human. We can't magically see stuff that doesn't exist. You're going to see it swipe up. And we have to tell it to swipe up because a person has to, so we have to. These are tests that are acting more like a person. And again, you're going to see little pink highlights for where it is. And you notice it's already swiped up, and it's going to say, where's contact us, and a little bit more robustness if it exists, just different ways to do a test. And it's going to highlight and check each one of these things. And it's, of course, doing it faster than I can even talk, which is awesome. We're going to validate the version. Here's a really great example of relationship. You say, where's the release date? Well, the release date is the date that's next to the word release date. Great example of relational capabilities. And here on this form, we're going to check it a little more detailed. We're going to check some inputs. It's a really great way for AI to understand inputs without having to do complex coding. And same thing with a button. We can just say there's a button that's called submit, interact with it. I wanted to check it and I wanted to highlight it. In this case, we're going to go back. We're going to look at that mobile security statement. And here's a really neat thing. I'm no longer in the app. I'm in a web browser. I'm in a mobile browser, but it's still just an interface. And I'm able to, go in there and look at it. I'm looking at its title, making sure it exists. And for the purpose of the demo, that's where I'm going to end things. I know I did cut out a couple of things from what I said the actual test case was, but in the case of wanting to, have time for Q&A at the end, I wanted to wrap it up there. But I find it important to show one key thing that I was looking for in this solution, and that was 2 things. One, I don't want to know a thing about the mobile application development. There's far too many things to be concerned with than having to develop or figure out how mobile app development works. And secondly, I think it would be silly to have to choose different paths. Oh, I need to have these 2 scripts, one for Android, one for iOS because of their back end. They're just screens. As long as the user experience is the same, then my script should be able to be the same. The same exact script is here. There is one key difference, and that's the back. And that has nothing to do with anything other than the operating system has different ways to go back. There's a back button on the Android that goes back. On iOS, well, shoot, I don't even have a button on my iPhone anymore. it's buttonless. There is no back button, so you have to choose things like user would use. So we have one small if statement in here that says if it's Android, click back. If not, there's the significant button at the top to go back to the screen. I think it's either an arrow or a done, I forget. But this is going to go through and it's interacting with it in the exact same way that we would expect because we just have an interface. I don't want to make it sound overly simple, but it's just an interface. You know, if tomorrow there was another phone that came out and was the same interface, I'd be like, yeah, got it covered. We're able to work with it. So we can see it's interacting the same way. It's finding the elements. It's finding our form fields. It's finding the buttons. Same thing here, mobile security statement, launching the browser. What's really awesome here, in my opinion, is in iOS and in Android, we're obviously using different browsers. It doesn't care. There is no object like that. And very quickly, I want to just take a peek at the report. Because we don't want to just assume magic and have this magical green light that says we passed, a red light that says we failed. We want to have some details, some context here. In here, we can see that it did do the 2 iterations, one iteration for the iPhone, one iteration for the Android device. And I'm just going to kind of pick a couple of these things to look at. You know, we looked at the about link. We can see the feedback mechanism there saying, you know, where did it find it? Sometimes this can be handy to determine, you know, what are you really interacting with? Looking at it and saying, well, you know, more than just an OCR engine, you know, we have some relational items here saying that the text that's next to the word release date is defined as the release date. That's how you would tell a person anyways. We tell the AI engine it that way. It's very, very simple to do. And I think there's lastly 2 things, just looking at a couple other different object types. So there's an input box. It's as easy as saying, hey, AI, I have this input box. It's called name. I want you to interface with it. Piece of cake. And then lastly, same thing for submit. I have a button, it's called submit. I'd like to interface with it. And it sounds overly simple to say it that way, but that's as hard as it is we say, hey, AI, I have this button, it's called submit, interface with it. In this case, I'm checking it, I highlighted it in the code. You know, maybe I'd want to click on it. You know, you can do all different things with it as well. Normal operations that you'd expect on objects, but a lot easier to interface with. So that's kind of where we're at with the demo to walk through. And because I really want to dive into the ability to ask questions, I want to just dive right into what we see as the benefits and takeaways from this so far. So in terms of script building, you know, we're able to build things a lot earlier and more reliably, unless of course we have a lot of design changes coming through. That is one of our criteria for automation right now. Are there going to be major design changes coming through? Yes. Well, it doesn't make sense to automate it in any world, to be perfectly honest. We want to make sure that design's fairly solid. Next comes through in terms of maintenance. You know, I would say, you know, I don't have an exact number right now, and more than half the changes that would come through that would impact things like it does for the web are no longer going to impact our scripts. Until that designer experience changes, which really touches back to the user, we don't have changes. In terms of coverage, that test right there, minus a couple of typos, because, hey, typos exist, was able to be developed in about 8 or 9 minutes. It's not too shabby for coverage of a test. And it was both operating systems at once. If this was an experience that was shared by the web as well, which this particular one is not, it's not like a website necessarily has an About Us page, it would have been a third victory in the sense that it would have been covered by the web. Other experiences like our login, some things in other pages that we have are near instant win for iOS app, Android app, and taking it to the web, whether it's in the mobile view or the desktop view. And in terms of, you know, you gotta have some fun. I mean, you know, this has been a wackadoodle past year. It's time to have fun, and this technique actually brings a bit of fun to automation again. In 2 forms for me. One, I'm pleased to be automating as close to an end user as I can right now. And it's pretty nifty. We're able to think more about the scenarios, more about the interactions, and less about, you know, dreaded deep-seated ways to interact with objects. All that's handled by us. You know, I always encourage development or automation teams to have abstraction. This is just yet another form of extraction. It just happens to be abstraction that's built in with the product for us to use. So, you'd abstract your code anyways, or at least I would hope that you would consider it. Why not consider using the abstraction that's made available to us and, makes automation fun again? I want to leave you with a quote if you want to think about something from my perspective. And this is real deal. This isn't made up. This isn't phony. And one of the only times I'm actually going to read off the slides is for the first time ever, I can write full automation code by only viewing a screenshot or a mockup. And in short, you give me a screenshot from one of our apps, and I can just instant message somebody back, email somebody back, a code snippet in text that will work on the screen. It doesn't have to be, it's the same thing. I don't need to build a script to send them. I don't need to do anything other than send them a couple of lines of code, and it's been working near flawless.
Wow, thank you, Chris. It's so inspiring, and the benefits that you have managed to see at the time you are using our AI capabilities are pretty much aligned with the benefits that we see, and actually the benefits that we were aiming in first place, and those are the following. We remember we talked about the automation coverage and the maintenance costs. So we want to help you guys to reduce like around about 70% of your overall maintenance cost. And why is that? It's because just think about, instead of having multiple scripts for the same purpose, just think about like Android, iOS, and a mobile web, right? If you're going to create a single script and not like 3 different scripts, well, and you don't need to maintain 3 different scripts when you face a change, then you're going to decrease the overall maintenance by 66%. No problem. Think about the resiliency. Think about the robustness of the test, that not upon every change of the developers your tests are going to break. It will be relatively, I would say, around about more than at least like of 10 to 15% contribution, but I leave it as around 70%. And also about a 30% of coverage and increase in the overall automation. And you saw how easy it is to create a test, both from my demo as well as from Chris' demo. And I think that the bottom line of why this number 30% is came up with, first of all, you saw that it's increasing dramatically, at least by 3 times the overall test development speed. And Chris was talking about fun. Think about it. Everyone now can contribute to the automation efforts. I like to call it the automation party. And with that, I think the last thing that I want to share with you today before we're moving to the Q&A part is that many times after having such as, and I'm hearing this question about, will AI eliminate the need for QA engineers? So the bottom line, guys, it's no. But it's definitely going to help you and your QA teams to revolutionize the way testing is done. It's definitely going to help you to be much more efficient, and it's definitely going to help you to have much more fun in the day-to-day automation. With that, I'll hand it over back to Nicole, and we can start with the Q&A part. So, Nicole.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Chris, and thank you, Eran. You have definitely sparked a lot of questions. So let's go ahead and get started. So, okay, the first one says, does it support Citrix automation using OCR capabilities? What I mean is I don't have to install the UFT agent in the Citrix server.
That's a very good question. Currently, the technologies that are supported within our AI capabilities are the mobile technologies, both hybrid as well as native application, as well as web browsers or desktop browsers, to be more precise. In regards to Citrix as well as desktop applications, this is something that we are now working on, and this is, I would say, our #1 priority to be introduced as part of the technology supported right after the latest release that we've just introduced to the market. By the way, it's a very good question in terms of technologies, because it might be a bit of misleading. There are no real technologies around AI, right? Because we are relying on the snapshot exactly like human beings. So you can ask, okay, so why Citrix is not working in that case? There are some I would say, challenges behind the scenes in regards to the way the agent operate. This is more of that, because AI, it's really about the screen size. So mobile has like a defined screen size, and the web has its own screen size, which we have different screen sizes support, and it's not really about the technology. technologies. It's about more of how we run the remote agent and how we make sure that those different elements will be identified in the proper way and the agent will be able to execute them as we expect it to be.
Thank you, thank you. There are a few more questions, and it's a multi-part question, Eran, so I'll just start with the first one.
Okay.
It says, is the latest UFT 15.02 AI available for current Micro Focus customers?
I think Chris can answer this, no?
Yeah, as long as you have the ability to request or download yourself, you can have 15.02 today. Actually, you had it
last November. So the 15.02
it was a
available.
good Thanksgiving. How's that sound?
Yes. So the 15.02 for the existing customers that have their support in place, they can download the version. They go to the tool option, activate the AI inside the GUI testing, and you have all the great and insightful IP for the AI usage to your own applications. And we will be more than happy to support you in your first steps of adopting the AI. It's maybe a good segue to say that we have also created an AI customer club program that help our customers to start with the first phases of adopting AI. And if this is something that you find interesting, shoot us an email and we will be more than happy to collaborate with you and with your account manager. That's for sure.
And if I can throw something in there,
yeah,
I'm sure most people are thinking that they need some brand new Alienware computer to be able to run this stuff. But right now, for growth and expandability, we use virtual machines on a hypervisor for our lab. And just a generic Windows 10 machine, I think ours are 8 gig of memory because Windows likes 8 gig better than 4, is all we've needed to be successful with this. We didn't need special NVIDIA graphics cards. We just needed some disk space to put UFT on, upgraded Windows 10, and rock and roll. That's it.
Great, thank you, Chris. So here comes the multi-part. So I'll ask it in different phases. So first question is it up to date with all the latest browsers? Second part, okay, thumbs up from Chris, thank you. Is it still on VB-script, or can we leverage all these capabilities with C, Java, Python with lean FT?
So as for UFT One, that exists with the VB script, as you saw it already in the demo. As for the UFT developer, lean FT, so to say, this we have also an early access program. If you guys would like to leverage, and the AI exists over there as well. If you guys would like to leverage this, then again, shoot us an email. We will be more than happy to add you to the early access program of our AI capabilities inside UFT developer.
Thank you. A few more questions. Can it use Selenium Grid for test execution, and what formats can the reports be generated?
Selenium script are not supported for the AI technology for now. Our AI service is planned to be expanded in the future, but for now we keep it as inside of our commercial solutions, which are the UFT One and of course the UFT developer, and definitely the AI as a service will be also available, I would say, in the foreseen future, also in our performance engineering areas, which are relates to the UI interaction.
Okay, next question from General Motors. What integration is in place with AZ? Okay, this is AZDO and Jenkins. I'm sure I'm not saying it correctly.
Okay, yeah. So Jenkins, AI does not need to integrate with Jenkins or with the Azure DevOps. As long as you have the integration with the UFT One for both Jenkins as well as the Azure DevOps, you will have the AI in place. Think about AI like yet another technology inside UFT. So even if you have a UFT integrated to your ALM, then you can create a scripts using your UFT, including the UFT One, including the UFT with the AI capabilities inside. And once you schedule a test to be executed from ALM, that will definitely work, because when ALM asks UFT to run something, it doesn't care what technology will be executed behind the scenes.
Okay, will the language of choice change to Python at some point instead of using VB script?
Correct. And then, and as I mentioned previously, then UFT One can integrate with both Azure DevOps as well as with Jenkins without the dependency of ALM. I saw just a question if there is a integration directly between UFT and Azure DevOps and also the Jenkins. So yes, the answer is yes. And you can get all the information definitely from the online documentation and see how easy that can be achieved.
Yeah, if memory serves me correct, the Jenkins pages are really well documented in terms of all the flavors of options you have with that.
Nicole, I saw one question regarding the version currency. So we have the 1501 and 1502. AI was introduced in 50.0 and it was improved in 1501. And now the latest and greatest is 1502. And we would recommend you, if you want to start to use the AI, not just the AI, by the way, the entire UFT One package, definitely you should upgrade to the latest and greatest version. The AI engine inside of it, it's much more advanced engine. The recording, for example, exists only in 1502. The mock identification that you saw earlier today exists in 1502. So if you want to get the full package, then the 1502 would be my recommendation to you today.
Okay, great. We still have a lot of questions to go through. I don't know, Ron, if you are seeing the questions, you want to just highlight some of the top ones, or I can just continue to go.
Let me see if there
While
are.
Ron's reading, I'm going to tackle Carlos,
Okay.
especially being in healthcare. Unless you send feedback, there's no data that goes to, oh, sorry. The question was, does it talk back to the mothership? I like that. Any need for special firewall rules? Coming in healthcare, dealing with a lot of PHI, it does not. There's no current way in which it sends your screens to Micro Focus for analysis. The only way that happens if you use feedback. And there is a way to pixelate your images when you're sending them. So if you do want to send something and say, there's this icon we want it to be identified, can you help us? You can pixelate out any PHI or private data that you want to send. But there are no special firewall rules for the AI pieces. I just thought, being a healthcare, good question for me to grab there.
Thank you.
And as Chris said, the AI service is embedded inside UFT One. So there is no kind of communication that being sent outside of UFT once you are using it. We do have the plans in the future to introduce the remote service and even maybe a potential cloud service for the AI capabilities for the customers who wants to consume this. And for example, if you want have a centralized server, which will include all the AI capabilities inside the organization, and then you can relatively work with, I would say, more kind of not stronger machines. If that one, if that approach will work for you better, then this is also something I would say we are baking in our engineering team for you. I think, Nicole, we have left with only 3 minutes, and I know that you want to cover some of the universe stuff. So maybe it will be a good time to say that we will take all the questions, and definitely we will get back to you with all the answers that we couldn't answer today. So, Nicole, maybe talk a bit about universe. Yes.
Yes, absolutely. If you want to go ahead and move to the slides. And for those that we didn't get the questions, thank you. Thank you so much. I will be sending out a post-event email, and in there'll be some additional resources. Maybe some of those questions will be answered in there. If not, you can just respond, and we'll make sure that we get all the rest of these questions answered for you. So I did just want to make mention as we wrap. I know we just have a couple minutes, but we are hosting Micro Focus Universe 2021. So that is our premier customer and partner event. That's coming up March 23rd and 24th. And in APJ, it's also the 25th. So I've listed the dates here. This is going to cover all of the different product groups that there's lots of information that's going to be disseminated in here. If you jump to the next slide, Iran, I think you guys will be more interested in this slide particularly. So here is kind of a breakdown of the ADM portfolio and what we're going to be showcasing here over the couple days. So, take a look at this. Don't have to write any notes here. I will send a link to all of this information so you can have it at a later date. But I did just want to make mention of it. It's coming up pretty soon, and we'd love to have you attend. You're going to hear from our product experts, our engineers, and have the time to kind of work with the different members of the Micro Focus team and answer a lot more in-depth questions on specific product information. So that is all I had for today. Iran and Chris, and Archie, thank you so much. Thank everyone for joining this call. I know it's hard being on all these Zoom calls and tied to your desk, but we really appreciate it. Hope you walked away with some valuable information. And thank you guys so much. Have a great rest of your day, evening,